I will, absolutely. Thanks so much, Ben. And again, thanks for organizing these communities of practice. I think these are a great vehicle for everyone to, well, learn a bit more, learn from each other. But then again, we need to hear as much as possible from the community out there as well. So, as Ben already talked about, what I want to do is I want to take KTA and extend that with additional capabilities that we've got within the broader Kofax Intelligent Automation platform. As always, I don't want to bother you with slides, but I just got a few of them just to run through that. So, as most of you might remember me from last time, I did a very quick introduction of where I came from, who I am. So, my name is Jesper Scherpenhauser. Please don't try to pronounce that last name. Please don't even try. Um, and I'm actually a physicist, or more specifically, an astrophysicist by trade. So I studied all of that at university. And you might then ask, well, Jesper, so what made you decide to join an enterprise software company like Kofax? Well, on the one hand, what we are being taught in university when you study physics, astrophysics, we are using a lot of tools to describe everything surrounding us, whether it's teeny tiny atoms, subatomic particles, you name it, all the way into, well, the universe as a whole. And what we try to do is we try to understand, maybe even describe, and eventually even to predict how things are going to happen. And what I now do in Kofax, so I joined Kofax 11 years ago, and what I do is I do that exact same thing, but with much more complex matter, being business processes. So that's one of the main reasons why I love working with intelligent automation that much, why I love spending a lot of time with our customers and really helping them with optimizing, well, and guiding them on their digital transformation journey. That being said, one of the key topics that we nowadays talk about is hyperautomation. So hyperautomation, as it is today, is not a Jesper thing. It's not a Kofax thing. It is more of an industry trend. And I think that if you ask 100 people for their personal definition of hyperautomation, you'll probably end up with at least 101 different definitions. I pulled up this definition that Gartner uses, but how I typically present it is hyperautomation is a state, or maybe more specifically, that journey that organizations, businesses embark upon to get to a point where they are able to digitally transform all of their business processes from start to finish. And what we then do as Kofax is we want to provide organizations, businesses, governments, you name it. We want to provide you with the tools and the capabilities, or even essentially the platform, in order to achieve that. So what you'll then maybe figure out is, okay, so digital transformation is that journey towards hyperautomation. But what you'll see is that a lot of organizations have very small pockets around all of their departments, trying to automate certain things in a very, well, random or unstructured approach. Well, the one thing is that will introduce a lot of risk, whether it's organizational risk, whether it's compliance risk, you name it. Because once you start to think about hyperautomation, you'll start to figure out, okay, well, I have a need within my organization for capabilities, for that platform that you can do. And I don't just want to do random one-shot automation initiatives here and there. I want to digitally transform my business as a whole. So that being said, once you understand what you're going to need, you'll figure out that with all of the capabilities that you have, you'll be able to digitally transform all of your departments, all of your functions within your organization, and you'll need to have a platform that supplies that. So what we've started on, maybe, well, more than a decade ago, is we try to pinpoint and analyze what the actual white space is within organizations when it comes to those capabilities that they need. And that was actually the start of what we now call our intelligent automation platform. So what we've done is we've identified those capabilities. And of course, we're going to start with our heritage, that's what which we came from, and that's of course cognitive capture. So how do we handle that 80 to 90% of unstructured content that is hidden within organizations, but also that is coming into organizations? And if you then combine that with all the, well, let's say, investments that we as Kofax have done when it comes to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing, you'll start to see, okay, well, that's a capability you want to have within your whole organization. But that's not the only thing you'll need. You'll also need to have that capability to get the human out of, sorry, the robot out of the human. So where you can actually automate all kinds of mundane, repetitive, mind-numbing tasks around you. So in today's scenario, I'll be using cognitive capture, I'll be using RPA, but what I'll also do is to, well, on the one hand, if you've got cognitive capture and you say, well, that will allow me to get all of the validated business data from all of the unstructured content that comes into my organization, I also need to be able to communicate to my stakeholders, whether they're within my organization or outside. Because to be quite fair, we as humans still don't have an API that, well, organizations can connect to. So we'll need to have a very human-friendly or customer-friendly, stakeholder-friendly way of communicating. Well, one of the key challenges you'll have with communicating to customers, stakeholders, citizens, patients, you name it, is what I used to call the flower process, where you'll have, let's say, employees in a customer-facing, well, a function that'll have their own personal stack of templates that they use, where they then copy and paste data in and out of. So why do I call that the flower process? Because what you'll have then is a tremendous risk of sharing the wrong information with the wrong patients because you forgot to maybe replace a data point here or there. And typically, well, you would get away with, if you did that, if you sent information from customer A to customer B, you would get away with just sending a bunch of flowers afterwards and then just apologize. But of course, nowadays, you're into GDPR compliancy issues and risks and the fines and regulatory actions that might happen afterwards. So
Hey,
this is
Jesper,
something, yeah, please go ahead.
can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yes, please
At the
do.
moment, I do not see any slides on the screen. It's basically your file explorer. Is this correct?
This is a file explorer, absolutely. So this is an example
Okay.
of those templates. No, great question, Ben, because this is exactly the risk that you have if you just have templates on your local device that you just keep reusing. So no, absolutely fair point.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
One more point, please, Jesper,
Yeah,
because I guess I forgot to mention this because I now basically I assume that your live presentation is starting soon. So
yeah,
to all the attendees, if you have any questions, on the
yeah.
right-hand side of your screen, there's the Q&A box. Use the Q&A box. We will have enough time for Q&A at the end. I will read the questions to Jesper. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Sorry for that. Jesper, you can move on.
No, no worries, Ben. No worries, no worries. This is a full contact sport, right? So yeah. So if you then want to prevent any sort of legislation or compliancy issues, you'll probably want to have a capability to communicate with external people or external placeholders, stakeholders. So you'll need to have automated communication generation, but at the same time, you don't want to take away the flexibility from your employees because you do need to make sure that they are able to do the job the best way they can. So you'll have that combination of templating, automated generation, but at the same time, you want to have that human aspect to communication as well, and at the same time, adhere to things like corporate identity, branding, you name it. So that's one thing. The other key thing that you'll see within these kind of hyper automation initiatives is that automation of business processes from start to finish will almost never just be contained to your organization itself. You will need to have that interaction, like I just showed, with external stakeholders, but you actually want them to become a part of that process where they play their roles, where they will need to do their thing to add to that. That's exactly where things like mobile capture, but maybe even more importantly, capabilities like e-signing come in. So if you are indeed doing an onboarding process, whether you're onboarding a new customer, when you're onboarding a citizen, a patient, you name it, there will be a time where they might need to go into that process and sign off on what is expected of them. And that's something I'll show in this HR onboarding process as well. But at the same time, the most important thing is we're talking about business processes. So you'll need to be able to take that whole process and actually orchestrate all of that in one single go, where you actually need to be able to bring together robotics, AI, machine learning, natural language processing, communication generation, e-signing, and of course all of the other capabilities that you need to do and achieve these business processes. So what we then call that, we call that hybrid workforce management, because you'll have workforces internally and externally to your organization. You'll have your virtual employees, as in robots, but also AI, machine learning there as well. And you need to bring all of that together to get that 360 degree view on the case you're working on. So that being said, all of those capabilities together, and there were a couple of them that I haven't mentioned here, but that is exactly what we envisioned when we went to market with the intelligent automation platform. So, as I said, don't want to bother you with too much slides. Let's dive into the actual scenario here. So what I want to do is I want to show you a quick example of HR onboarding, but the same principles and the same functionality and the same capabilities will also apply to any other business process. It doesn't necessarily need to be, well, limited to, let's say, onboarding, whether it's customer onboarding, patient onboarding, or in this case, HR onboarding. So I'm just going to bring some things together, but what we're going to start with is exactly a thing that we will all recognize, which is a resume, a CV, a curriculum vitae, if I'm actually pronouncing that correctly. My third grade Latin teacher will probably spin around when they hear me say it like that. But that's where we start with. So what we want to do is we want to use cognitive capture capabilities to extract the right data from that resume. We then also want to have robotics to go out and gather as much information on that candidate as we can. And that can, of course, be internal systems like HR systems, but it could also very well be that those robots then go out to, let's say, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, maybe even your Instagram or TikTok profile, and gather as much information as we need. But once we've done all of that, once we've done our due diligence as an employer, we'll need to actually start drafting a contract. And those kind of HR contracts will typically have several versions being reviewed before they're actually going to be sent out to a candidate. But what you don't want is you don't want to just send out a contract and then wait for a candidate to actually sign it and send it back in. No, you want to be in complete control, because especially nowadays with the labor shortages at hand, the quicker you can get a candidate to sign, the higher the chances are that they won't be scooped up by one of your competitors. So that all being said, let's dive in. So as mentioned, I'm just going to go into my KTA workspace. And from there, I'm just going to start by submitting this CV, this resume. I'm not going to extract all of the data from it. We all know how KTA is extremely powerful in doing so. But again, this is an art of the possible approach, right? So I'm just going to submit that CV, that resume, whether that came in through a mobile device, from a website, or from, well, God knows what other channels you might want to enable KTA on. But let's just grab that CV and just submit that to the system. So we've now submitted that. And if we then open up the KTA workspace again, and we open up the jobs that we're now doing. So I'm just going to give you a slight peek into the processes that are happening in the background. So in this case, it's very straightforward. We receive the CV, we're processing the image, we're extracting the relevant information, and after that, we're going to present it for validation. And as always, validation is typically a very optional step in this process, where you might say, if I don't hit certain confidence levels, because of course we're working with AI, we're working with machine learning, so nothing is true or false. It's always in that gray area where you might say I'm 50% confident, I'm 80% confident, or maybe even 90 to 95% confident. But once you get to that point, you'll then have that option to set that benchmark or set that bandwidth. Okay, well, I do want to have a human in this loop approach. But we right now see that this has been submitted for validation. And if we now go into the work queue, you'll see that I actually have received that validation task. So that validation task will show me, okay, well, in this case, we already extracted all of the information with high enough confidence levels. But for the sake of this demo, let's just have a quick look. So we did extract these 3 data points that I've defined. As mentioned, we could extend this to contain every data point that's in this CV into this process, but I don't want to bother you with all of that. But what we now do is, once we get the automated data extraction done, and we don't hit the confidence levels yet, at that point, we don't really have validated business data. Only once a human then reviews them, then they'll become validated. But of course, once they do hit the confidence levels, it'll go just straight through. But let's continue. So once we've done this part of the process is already done. And what you'll see, if I go into the new jobs that we'll have, you'll see that we now have started a KTA case specifically for Bankrite employee onboarding. So Laura Wilson, we all know and love, she already submitted that CV, and she's now in that process of being onboarded. So what you'll immediately see in this process that we've designed is the first step was an automated step. And this is exactly that robot, that RPA robot that goes out and extracts all of the and all of the data that is relevant for this. So in this case, it might have gone out to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and found all of the relevant information from those external sources. But it could also have interface with any of the, HR systems you already have, to really get that 360 view on this candidate. And what you'll then see is that we'll have a task assigned to a human, in this case, an HR employee, to draft that contract. Once that's done, it's going to be reviewed. If needed, additional versions will be created indefinitely. And once we've done that, we are indeed going to step out of the confines of our organization, out of the confines of Bankrite in this case, and we're going to submit that document to Laura. So she has the option to review that new contract on her device of choice, whether it's a phone, a tablet, her laptop, you name it. And once she then decides to sign, she'll be sent the invitation. And I'll also show you later on how we can extend this process with, for instance, additional robot activities or anything else. But of course, we do have all of the options. If, for instance, she declines the contract, that is going to go back into the process to be, changed by anyone within HR. So let's just do right that. So I'm going to log in. In this case, I'm going to log in as an HR case handler. In this case, it's Mike Sweeney. So what you'll see is that Mike Sweeney has received that task to draft the actual contract. So I can just open this up and zoom in a bit. And what you'll now see is that he will be guided through this wizard-like approach to actually draft that initial contract for Laura. So all of the data that we already have on Laura from those internal and external resources will already be present in this workflow. But we are, of course, being presented with very specific questions. So let's select that she's going to be onboarded as a production manager, and we can go to the next step. What we're now going to be presented with is exactly what we expected. So we now have that contract of employment ready to go. And what you'll immediately see is that all of these data points are indeed pre-populated from those, well, plethora of sources that we have. And certain points on this document will need to be answered. For instance, her salary, if that has not been a part of the actual HR system yet. So I can just click that and answer that question. I'm in a giving mood, so I'm just going to give her $120 per annum. Well, inflation, what it is today, I think that's a fair thing. Payments are going to be made in a weekly manner. Another thing that I want to point out here is that the actual templates that we are using right now is maintained by a business user. So it's not built in HTML. It's not built in anything like that. It's actually built in Kofax Communication Manager, which is, of course, tightly integrated with Kofax TotalAgility. But because of that, we have been able to lock down certain parts of this document, and certain parts, which you can recognize by the small pen here, are indeed editable by, in this case, the end user, Mike Sweeney. So we can make some changes to this if we want. So let's say we're going to change the template to say, well, it's going to be a senior production manager. Or we can update the hours of work. So we can say, well, this is actually not for 40, but to 36. And we can also pull in any of the other data points that we have. So we can just drag and drop these in at the same time. I'll just want to cancel that and just save that first. There we go. But you'll also see that certain parts of this document have been locked down for compliancy reasons. So the organization can rest assured that they will never generate a contract, an employment contract, that would be in compliance with their rules and regulations. But we still have made it simple enough for, in this case, Mike Sweeney, to make those changes. So we are allowing him to do his best job in the right way that he wants. So once we are done with this, we can go click on next, and he is able to continue with all of the other tasks that have been assigned to him. If we then have a look at the actual case, you'll see that we've transitioned from draft contract to review contract, and that has, of course, not been assigned to Mike, but we actually need to log in as Mike's supervisor, and that's in this case Sarah Jones. So Sarah Jones is then being presented with that review contract step. And what we've now done is we are just presenting that contract to her immediately, so she can actually review all of this. So she can see, okay, well, we've set it to $120 per annum. It's now senior production manager, and all of the other, T's and C's are included there as well, even dynamically generated images, QR codes, you name it. And she is then allowed to either approve or reject it. But again, this is how we designed the process. We might have designed the process so that Sarah herself can actually make changes to this document and then immediately approve it. But due to, the rules that are in place in bank rights, she'll actually have to reject it and actually say, well, hey, WTF, Mike, it needs to be junior, not senior. Get your act together. And just complete that. So what we'll now see is that in this process, this has now been marked as it needs some rework. So again, if we then step away from Sarah's inbox, but we actually go to the work queue for Mike again, you'll see that he has received that request to update the contract. So he's got the actual comment from Sarah immediately visible there, and he is then able to, well, just continue on with his works because all of the changes that he made on the first go are already there. So he'll see that, okay, it's still 120, it's still senior, weekly. So we can just click this and change this from senior to junior. And we might then want to say, well, maybe 120 is a bit much. Let's change that from 120 to 90, update that, and click on next. But as we are still working within the Kofax Intelligent Automation platform, all of these data changes are, of course, logged and available for auditing going forward. So we're back from here to the review step that Sarah had to do. And if we then look in, you'll see that she's able to review the new contract. And again, we've created this so she's only going to be presented with the latest version. You can also make sure that she's able to review all versions, the whole history there as well. And we'll now see that it says junior and 90%, all of that, and we can actually approve it. So this would now be the end of such a process because we've now done all of the steps that would be with internal stakeholders. But what we now need to do is we need to bring Laura into this process as well. But as she's, of course, not a Bankrite employee yet, she doesn't have access to this system. That's, of course, something where SignDoc, Kofax SignDoc, our e-signing solution comes into play as well. So you'll just saw that notification coming in, and Laura actually just received an e-sign request via Kofax SignDoc. So that document that we just created is now available for Laura to sign. So let's just open up that document straight away. And she is then again guided in a wizard-like approach to go through a signing ceremony. So she'll need to consent to e-signing. We need to, of course, make sure that this is AE-DUS compliant in the EU. It needs to be complied with the e-signing act in the US, you name it. So if we then click on next, she'll be presented with that exact document that initially Mike created. Sarah then rejected, Mike then updated it, made some changes, Sarah approved it, and now we, as, well, in this case, Laura Wilson, will be able to actually sign it. So as you can see, everything is pre-populated, it's all there, and we are immediately presented with that option to sign on her behalf. I'm just going to do this from my laptop right now, but just imagine how this will work on an iPad or on your iPhone, because right now I'm just going to sign it with this, Laura, there you go, and apply it. We could also, of course, send this back to the HR department and say, well, hey, there's something wrong here, you misspelled my name, or whatever reason that you might have. But now we've got this signed, we can save this, and we can finish this process altogether. So what you'll immediately see is that Laura has already received a copy of that signed document, of course, all following open standards when it comes to e-signing and encrypting of that document. Let me just quickly open that up. There you go, we've got it. And at the same time, if we open up the actual process that we've got here, and we update this, you'll see that we immediately got that signed document from Laura back into the process. So this has become a very seamless onboarding process where this overview is immediately, well, aware of all of the changes that have been made. And the last step is, again, we're just going to use Kofax Communication Manager to generate an in this case, a personalized invitation email where we're going to say, well, welcome to Bankrite. We expect you on the 13th of October for new hire training. So we can congratulate Laura on her new job, and that's about it. But again, what I want to get across to everyone is that if we have a look at how we designed this actual process, let me just grab the process that we just had. And let me just walk you through all of it again. Let me just collapse this here. So this is a very nice combination of this process orchestration that's happening within Kofax. You saw how we started off by using our cognitive capture capabilities to start that process with the information from the actual CV or resume. We then have our Kofax RPA robot going out to retrieve all of the information that we needed. We then had some KCM activities here as well. I'm going to open up the forms designer a bit later. We're then using Kofax SignDoc to actually, well, extend the process to someone externally. And then we'll have this invitation there too. But maybe we want to add another step to it. So we might actually say, well, hey, I want to add another step here where we are actually going to go into our mainframes and update our HR mainframe with all the information we now have on Laura, so that indeed when she comes to new hire training, that her laptop will be ready and her account will be set up. So we can just easily go in and just add a Kofax RPA step where we can just say, well, we're just going to do an RPA process there, and we can just add any robot that we want at the exact same time. So that's how we can then design these processes. If we then also want to show, okay, well, how easy is it then to also design the forms that we have? So the actual KTA forms, for instance, for this process, let's just grab, well, let's grab the compose step. As mentioned, this is all out of the box integration between Kofax TotalAgility and Kofax Communication Manager, where you can just drag one of these Kofax KCM controls like this onto your form and just configure it as you want it. And you'll just have it at the exact same time. And this is one of those strengths that you'll have when you combine all of these capabilities within the Kofax Intelligent Automation platform. So keep in mind, the Kofax Intelligent Automation platform is, of course, an open and, of course, very scalable platform. But what you might want to keep in mind that if you as an organization have already made decisions on some of these capabilities before, let's say you're using another RPA platform, we'll have connectors for those as well. If you decided on another e-signing solution, you can easily connect that here as well. If you've got another way of document generation or communication generation, you can easily bring that into KTA. The fact of the matter is, the most important is that you will have an actual platform of those capabilities available in your organization that all of your departments, all of your functions can leverage in further digitally transforming your actual business. That's about the last thing I wanted to say about the actual demo itself. So we talked about all of these capabilities, and well, not all of them in the same level of detail, but it'll all be brought together, right? And what I want to say is once you start to take all of these capabilities together, well, I'm a metalhead by historically, so I always want to say, well, just keep rocking on and just keep doing that. And if you want to see any additional demos, of course, I would be, well, Ben will probably be very cross with me if I don't say, well, look at all of the other community of practice recordings. The other option you have is always to go to the Kofax Demo Center, which you can find at kofaxdemocenter.com, where you'll find a lot of demos. And on top of that, I have my very own intelligent automation channel on YouTube as well. So feel free to scan this QR code, and you'll be presented with a lot of demos, a lot of more in-depth processes there as well. And of course, as I should say, as now being a YouTube personality, like, subscribe, and comment. I think that's the way you should say it. But with that, I'll probably want to hand it over back to Ben.
Jasper, thank you so much.
My pleasure and my honor.
Open and scalable hyper automation. This is what we just experienced live, and this is what we provide here at Kofax. This is such a great demo. Thank you for that. The overview at the beginning, then the live demo. So, well, really nice presentation. We have one question in the chat only. I guess people have been focusing on your demo so much that they forgot to type something, but the question, I read it to you. Jasper, would it be possible with the current integration of KTA to Kofax SignDoc to sign while the applicant is going through the application process? For instance, without having to wait for an email which would interrupt the onboarding process.
No, absolutely. That is one thing that is possible. You might need to make some changes to how you currently use the standard and well, the one size fits all integration point. But the beauty is that SignDoc on its own offers a lot of integration points. So what you can then do is indeed use KTA to do a call to SignDoc. SignDoc will then provide the actual signing URL back to KTA, and you can then immediately from one KTA form transition seamlessly to that signing ceremony. So it's not part of the one size fits all integration, but it is part in the broader, more productized integration as well.
Thanks, Jasper.
Absolutely great question. The one who asked that really knows his things.
All right, thank you. So there's no more questions in the chat, and yeah, I guess you had enough time now to scan this QR code that you see on the screen. So I'm going to change screens now. Thanks again, Jasper, and then let's have a look what we have next.